So today we'll be starting with understanding about the storage account. So generally when you create a virtual machine, for the virtual machine, obviously
Sorry to interrupt you.
so yeah, please.
Actually,
Mm,
we done a networking right
mm,
last
correct.
week.
Before the in the last session we discussed about the virtual machines, and before that we discussed about the network.
Last week we discussed networking, right?
Yes, networking, and also we discussed about the virtual machines. Yes,
Virtual machines. Maybe I missed the class.
you might have missed it.
Yeah, because last class is Friday only, right?
Correct.
I attended right.
Okay, anyhow, we'll share you the recordings, no issues, so you can go through that. Okay, so till now I haven't shared the recordings with any one of you. I'll share you the recordings shortly. Okay,
Okay. Actually, the networking part we discussed on Thursday or Friday.
I think it's on Thursday.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so then we can continue further. So as I said earlier, whenever you create a virtual machine, for the virtual machine, hard disk has to be provisioned. So the hard disk, we usually call it as the virtual hard disk. So basically the virtual hard disk is going to be provisioned from the storage. So the virtual machine will be created in one physical server, and for that virtual machine the hard disk will be provisioned from a storage. So basically the virtual machine should have access to the storage. So for the virtual machine to get access to the storage, so basically it requires some sort of credentials. So basically that is the storage account. So whenever you create a virtual machine, for that virtual machine you can uh, define a storage account in which the virtual machines virtual hard disk may get created. So in this session we'll be discussing about the storage accounts. So basically, the storage account in Azure, which has a different kind of storage services, that is the blob service, file service, queue service, table service. And basically, this storage can be accessed using the HTTP or HTTPS. So that is the great thing about the Azure storage. So it shall be a blob storage or a file storage or a queue storage. So that can be accessed using HTTP or HTTPS. And also this storage account is basically is going to be highly available and more secure, and also you'll have massive of storage space, so there where you can have a maximum of scalability. And in Azure account, basically there are different type of storage accounts. So basically, based on your requirement and based on the pricing and based on the use case, so you can decide what type of storage account is required for your application or for your deployment. So here are the types of storage accounts. So initially speaking about the general purpose V2. So general purpose basically where you can have the blob storage or file storage or queue storage or a table storage. So basically the general purpose storage will have all kind of storage services. So basically here the blob storage is where you have your virtual machine, where you'll have the hard disk of your virtual machines. And file storage is something like you can have your file shares like a CIFS share or NFS shares, and similarly the queue storage and the tables. And Azure actually they have improved their general purpose storage account. So earlier we had the older version is represented as general purpose V1 account, and currently they have made some improvements in security and accessibility. So that is basically the general purpose V2 storage account. And apart from that, we also have a block a blob storage account. So blob storage. Basically, the blob storage, as I said earlier, blob storage is the storage where you can have the virtual hard disk of your virtual machine. And in the blob storage, they have three type of blobs. That is block blob, page blob, and then append blob. So basically, the block blobs are usually suitable for storing the archival data or storing the backups. So where it has the huge storage capacity with low cost, and where maybe the read performance might not be that much extreme. So but based on your requirement, basically the block blobs are used for backup purposes. And also you have a file storage account. So file storage account where you can create only the file shares. So that shall be a NFS share or a CFS share, as like you have a NAS box in your premises. So where you can create the CFS share or for Windows machines and NFS share for Linux machine. Similarly, in this file storage account, you can create file shares alone, where you cannot create the blob storage. That is where you cannot create the virtual hard disk. And apart from that, we have blob only storage. So basically, it is a legacy storage account type of the general purpose. So currently, if required, you can also use the blob storage account. And also we have the different type of storage access tiers. So access tiers, again, based on the performance or based on the use case. So your requirement may vary. Say example, for archival data, you might require a huge capacity. Maybe you might not use the files frequently, so in that case high performance storage might not be required. But in case if you have a use case where the files are going to be accessed frequently, so in that case you need to have a high performance storage. So basically, based on your requirement or based on the application's requirement, so you can choose the uh, optimal type of storage access tier. So basically, there are a hot access tier, cool access tier. Hot access tier is basically recommended for the storage requirement where the files or folders are going to be uh, used frequently. So where the rewrite performance is going to be high. So that is about the hot access tier. And speaking about the cold access tier, so where the um, any data which is not frequently used, something like your archival data or your backup data, so those kind of storage requirement, you can go with the cool access tier. And basically this kind of storages are more cheaper comparing to the hot access tier. And apart from that, you also have the archive tier. So archive tier is dedicatedly for the archival storage or the backup storage. So the important thing about the archive tier is the storage cost is very less comparing to all the other. And also the uh, retrieval period. So whatever the data stored, when you are trying to retrieve those data, the retrieval time will be high. So that is a very important thing about the archive tier. So basically, this archive tier is a special type of storage access tier for the backup purpose. And further speaking about the storage redundancy, so you'll have locally redundant storage. So locally redundant storage means where you'll have minimum 3 copies of your data in your primary region, so that if in case any one particular storage goes down, still you have two more copies, so that you'll never lose your data. Maybe in case the entire region also may fail, so in that cases you can go with the zone redundant storage. So where you'll have your data are copied synchronously across multiple availability zones in the particular primary region. And also you have the geo redundant in case of the entire region failure, so that you can also have your data replicated synchronously 3 times in the primary region, and also it is copied asynchronously to the secondary region. And also this geo-redundant storage is obviously going to be a costlier solution. So in that case, you can also go with a little bit lower cost with read access geo-redundant storage. So where the secondary location will have only the read access. And also you have the geo zone redundant. So geo zone redundant in the sense where your data is copied synchronously across the availability zones in the primary region, and also the same data is copied asynchronously to the secondary regions to all the zones. So that's how you can have the little more high redundancy. And here too, you can have the read access geo redundant storage with lower cost comparing to geo zone redundant storage. And further understanding about the storage account endpoints. See, basically, whatever the storage you have or whatever the storage you use, uh, basically you need to have some kind of uh, way of access to the storage. You may have a virtual hard disk. So basically this virtual hard disk should be accessed by your virtual machines. So how the virtual machine can identify the virtual hard disk? So first of all, the virtual machine should identify the storage account. Inside the storage account, it should identify the virtual hard disk. So basically, to identify and to get connected with the virtual hard disk or any storage, so here Azure uses the URLs. So as we discussed earlier, so this storage, it might be a file storage or a table storage or a blob storage. So those storage can be accessed using HTTP or HTTPS. So since it can be accessed using HTTP or HTTPS, so basically all the storage resources will have the unique URL. So in the screen you can see the URL for blob storage or table storage or queue storage and Azure files. So using the URL, so anyone can get connected to the respective storage based on the provided the user who is accessing the storage. They should have the appropriate credentials. And also we have two type of disk provisioning. One is the managed disk, the other one is unmanaged disk. See, generally, when a virtual machine needs a virtual hard disk, so it should have the storage account. So using the credential where the virtual machine can get access to the storage and it can get access to the virtual hard disk. So who is going to create the storage account? So you have two options. One is the system itself can create the storage account, or as a support professional, we can create the storage account manually. So when you're going with Azure managed disk, so where Azure itself will create the storage account. So where you need not to manage the storage account. So where uh, creating the storage account and managing the storage account or managing the disk, everything is going to be managed by Azure itself. So that's why it is called as Azure managed disk. Apart from that, we also have Azure Unmanaged Disk. So where the customer creates the storage account, where the customer manages the virtual hard disk. So that is basically the Azure Unmanaged Disk. So where Azure is not managing it, where the customer is managing it. So that's why it is named as Unmanaged Disk. And also we have a different type of disks. So that is we have ultra disk or premium solid state drives and standard SSDs and standard hard disk drives. So standard hard disk drives is something like your regular magnetic disk. Initially understanding about the ultra disk. So basically this ultra disk will have a high throughput and high disk IOPS. So where the uh, read rate performance and the latency is going to be very low, so that the read rate performance is going to be very high and the latency is going to be very less, so that when your application requires a high performance storage, so in that case you can go with the ultra disks. So obviously ultra disks are more costlier comparing to other than that. We also have the Azure Premium SSD. So obviously we all know SSD disk has more disk IOPS and throughput. So comparing to Ultra Disk, so Azure Premium SSDs also will have the great performance, but where Ultra Disk will have extreme performance, and the Premium SSD will have better performance. And also we have standard SSDs. So comparing to premium SSD, the standard SSD will have a slightly lower disk IOPS and lower throughput. So, but this standard SSD is very much sufficient for your production applications like your web applications or even a file server and so on. And also you have Azure Standard HDD, so where your application doesn't requires more disk IOPS or doesn't require more data throughput. So in that case, you can go with the standard HDD, something like you have a DHCP server or you have a print server. So where more disk IOPS or more data throughput is not required. So in that cases, you can go with Azure Standard HDDs. And here is the comparison of the type of disk. So you can see the capacity. So Ultra Disk has up to 64 terabytes, and where Premium SSD, Standard SSD, and Standard HDD has you can maximum up to 32 terabytes. And speaking about the throughput, so Ultra Disk has the highest throughput, and Premium SSD comparing to Ultra Disk less than 50%, and the standard SSD just a little bit lower comparing to the premium SSD. And standard SSD also standard HDD also has a better performance, but comparatively it has the low disk throughput. And similarly, you can see the IOPS also, where Ultra Disk has 1,60,000 disk IOPS, and premium SSD 20,000, and standard SSD 6,000, and standard HDD has 2,000 IOPS. So based on the understanding, so you can choose what type of disk your virtual machine
Uh,
requires.
Hi,
Yeah,
Rajguru here.
yes,
I have a
please.
question. Actually,
Mm,
comparing similar to SSD, I
mm.
hear that the new technology, which is flash drive, will that Azure supports a flash drive as well?
Okay, so what do you think about SSD? What is it basically?
Is that refers to solid state disk?
Okay,
Yeah.
what is that solid state? That is
It's
basically the
a
flash.
yeah. Okay.
Okay, so even your
Mhm.
SSD is also a kind of flash drive.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. But here,
Yeah.
that's why they are naming the ultra disk. So basically, this ultra disk are equivalent to the flash disk.
Flash disk.
Yeah.
And okay, all right.
Got it.
What is the difference between premium and standard SSD?
So only the difference in the performance of the throughput and IOPS. Nothing more than that. Got it.
Yeah, I'm thinking the hardware level, how they are giving
Okay,
it.
hardware level. See, whenever you purchase the SSD disk, you'll have different specifications for different hard disks, right?
Yeah, yes, I
So
understood.
the
So there
similar
is,
kind of difference.
yeah, because I'm also using these SSDs,
Mm.
but while
I
using
can give you the
when
comparison with even a SATA disk. See, SATA disk, you have RPM 5,400, 7,200, and 10,000 RPM, and even 15,000 RPM also, right? But all four are SATA disk, but still you have different level of performance based on the RPM. So similarly here in SSDs also, you have the difference in with respect to the performance based on the technology which is used over there. Okay.
yeah, good.
Okay. Is there any questions? Please let me know. Okay, so if there is no more questions, we can proceed further. So we'll proceed with creating a storage account. If any one of you can share your screen, we can uh, see the demo on creating the storage account. Who is willing to share your screen? I'm waiting for your response.
I think it looks like nobody has created the Azure account.
No, maximum of
Anybody created?
students created. Yeah, many created. On the other day, I think Chandru created, Kumar
I think
created.
it looks like people are connected through their laptop or their tab or something like that. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
So I used to I actually connected through my tab. Sorry, I
Okay.
used to
Okay,
connect my tab.
understood.
I will share my screen. Okay.
Please, please.
But
Actually, we have some just came from office. So just connected with my tab. Sorry, so I didn't able to share my.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
No issues. Okay, you can go to portal.azure.com. Okay, so under services, you can go to storage in the left pane. So in the right pane, you can see the storage accounts on the top. Yeah. So here you can press on create.
basically, storage accounts will cost anything.
Storage account will not cost for you. Only the storage, whenever you use the virtual hard disk or the file shares, whenever the storage space is consumed, that case you are going to be charged. Okay, if you have any resource group, you can use it. Otherwise, you can create new. Okay, you can just press OK. And you can give any name for your storage account. And the name, whatever you type, that should be in lowercase without any special characters. And that name should be unique in that particular region. Just give any name and check whether the name is available. Okay, these common names will be always taken. You try to add your name. Try to add your name. Maybe Chandru SA, that is storage account. Type SA01. Okay, so press the cursor somewhere outside. Okay, so which means the name is available. And also you can choose the region. So basically, when you're choosing the region, make sure that you're going to create your virtual machine and your virtual network in the same region. So because this storage account is going to be used for your virtual machine, and basically the virtual machine is going to be connected to a virtual network. So make sure that all the three resources are in the same region. Okay, you can choose whichever the region you want. And coming to the performance, so just before we were discussing about the performance, standard performance and premium performance. So under standard performance, you try to select the redundancy, click on the drop down list. So you have locally redundant, geo redundant, zone redundant, and a geo zone redundant. So you'll have four options. You try to go with the performance tier, performance, change it to premium. So when you're choosing the premium, so you'll be able to create only blob storage, file shares, or page blobs. Just click the cursor somewhere outside. Go to the redundancy. So where you'll have only the locally redundant, because when you're going with the performance tier, so you're allowed to have your data replicated only within the same region. So that's how you can achieve you can achieve the highest performance. So based on your requirement, you can choose whatever you want. So for now we can go with the standard performance with locally redundant, so that would do better for us. And then you can go advanced. Okay, so here you can choose what type of REST API, whether it is required or not. And if you want to implement the encryption, so basically you need to have the encryption keys set before. So currently we are not going to use the encryption. And also if you want to allow the public access, so by default it is enabled. So maybe all the configurations whatever you define here, so later we can also change this. And also storage account access key, basically that is also enabled. If in case any changes has to be done, you can change, otherwise you can leave all these as it is. But most of the cases, so the default settings will do, apart from except the encryption. So basically when your organization requires more security, in that case you can enable encryption. But before enabling encryption, so make sure you have the encryption keys with you. Even that is a service, you can also get the same service from Azure itself. Now we can go to networking, and here you can define, so from where this storage account should get accessed. So when you're choosing public endpoint, so this storage account can be accessed from anywhere, from your premises or from public internet, from anywhere. And you can also be specific with public endpoint with a selected network. So in that case, please select on that second option. So in that case, you'll have to select the virtual network. If you have already virtual network created, so under the virtual network, when you click on the drop down, so you'll have the list of networks. So you can select that particular network, so that your virtual machines which is connected to that particular VNet alone will have access to this storage account. Or else you can go with the private endpoint, so where the storage account will be accessed only from the private network. So where we need to add the private endpoint manually. So for now we'll go with the public endpoint with all network. And routing preference, you can use the Microsoft routing, network routing, or you can use the internet routing. So Microsoft routing is a better option. And coming to the data protection, please click on data protection. And here also you can see if your any resources are deleted, how long it can be retained. So you can change the retention period, so based on your requirement. So by default it will be 7 days. So maybe based on your requirement you can change these days. And that's all the configurations. So now you can press on review plus create. So this is basically the what to say, the mm, unmanaged storage account. Since we are creating the storage account manually, so this is considered as the unmanaged storage account. Okay, on the top you can see the final validation is in progress. Okay, the validation is passed. So now you can press on create. Okay, so storage account is created. Just press on go to resource. So under the storage account, you can go to the blob service, select on the blob service. Maybe you can, in the left pane, you can scroll down, scroll down further, scroll down further, little bit up, little bit up. Okay, not that one, little bit up. Okay, stop. So the left pane, you can see under storage, you can see the containers. Under data storage, you can see containers. The first one, correct. So under the containers, you can, so currently there is no containers available, but later after creating the virtual machine, a default container will be created in the name of VHDs. So, or else if you want to manage the containers by yourself, so you can create containers with whatever the name you want, something like you can have a container for file server separately, you can maintain containers for application servers separately, or based on the project or based on the application or based on whatever you need, you can create the containers. So container is basically the one in which the VHDs will be stored. So basically the container contains the VHDs. So using the containers, you can organize your VHDs so that it will be easy for you to manage those VHDs later. And currently we don't want to create the container, because while creating the virtual machine, we will specify this storage account while creating the virtual machine, so that the virtual machine virtual hard disk will be created inside this storage account. At that time, the VHD a container will be created in the name of VHDs. So with this we'll stop here. So that's what about creating the storage account. So in the previous session, we were discussing about creating the virtual network, and now we discussed about creating the storage account. So in the next session, we'll be using this virtual network and storage account to create the virtual machine, and further we'll be discussing on the next session. And regarding this topic or whatever we have discussed today, if you have any questions or any doubts, please let me know.
Hi, actually regarding last week session, I couldn't attend it.
Okay, no
So I
issues.
would like
I'll share you the
to,
recordings so that you can make use of that.
okay. Yeah, if you have, can you please share it through the WhatsApp
Sure,
group?
sure. I haven't shared with anyone. I'll share with you all.
Yeah, just one class I just missed last week.
Sure,
That,
sure.
that,
I'll share.
that discussion
Yeah,
about virtual networks.
I'm also missed the last Friday class.
Okay,
I'm
no
thinking
issues.
I
I'll share you
attended,
in the
but
group.
I'm not
I'll
sure
share
it.
the recordings in the group so that you can go through that.
Normally in production environment, what type of storages we use?
No, that is basically based on the requirement. Say if you're using application like a web application. So for this web application, generally you can go with the standard SSD or premium SSD. Maybe if in case you're going with a, SQL database or Oracle database. So for database based application, so basically it requires more disk IOPS. So in that case, you have to choose a disk type with more disk IOPS. And again, if your application doesn't require more disk IOPS, you can go with the standard SSD or premium SSD. Say example, my application is going to be a banking application, so where lakhs of users are going to access my application. So in that case, it is always recommended to go with Ultra disk. So there is no standard type of disk that can be used, because based on your application's requirement or based on the service, whatever you're configuring. So based on that, you need to decide, because here not only the performance is involved, cost is also involved. So being a cloud support professional or a cloud architect, so you should work on both performance as well as the cost. So you need to choose where performance is required. In that case, you go with the performance disk. Wherever performance is not a consideration, in that case, go with the less performance disk. So that is going to be obvious choice based on your application's requirement. You cannot go with any standard pattern.
Okay, as you said, like based on our requirement, we have to choose it.
Correct. So first of all, you need to get the requirements from your application team. So based on the requirements, so you can decide what type of storage account can be used.
Let's say I am hosting some web servers that used to connect from my end users, like the 1,000 or 10,000 users are going to access the web servers. And the backend database, let's say I'm having some Oracle or SQL, something like that. So if I want to integrate it, in that case, we can go for high performance.
So
like
basically, you're going to have the SQL server in a separate VM and application in a separate VM, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So here the requirement is maybe 10,000 users. So obviously, you can consider that 10,000 users are concurrently accessing the application. So which means that the requirement is 10,000 IOPS. So which storage type can give you 10,000 IOPS? So obviously premium SSD.
Obviously, yeah, Ultra SSD, exactly. Yeah.
Premium SSD can give up to 20,000, right?
Yeah,
that's enough.
Yeah, it's like
so ultra disk is not required.
Yeah, it's a high busy, high critical application. Like say, frequently, oftenly accessing by the customers from the endpoint sites. So we can go for the high performance.
Correct.
Ultra disk, even for application as well as database, both we can deploy in that.
Correct.
That way.
But it is not that both should have similar kind of performance, because application might not require more disk IOPS.
Yeah,
Because
yes, exactly.
whatever the transaction the user is doing through the application, that is going to be done on the database.
Yes, yeah.
So,
Right.
so based on this, you need to design.
Okay, based on the backend database, what we are going to use and which kind of IOPS we need for the disk performance, we have to choose. Okay.
Correct, exactly.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Any more questions?
So this is Rajesh.
Yes, Mr. Rajesh.
Yeah, so I have one question regarding the storage you mentioned that. If we create a storage, then it will be created as a VHDX format, right?
That is, no, storage account is just a credential, something like a credential. Okay. When you're creating the virtual machine, at that time only VHD will get created.
Yeah.
So the virtual hard disk will have the extension of .vhd.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's what. So if I want to make the VHDX to copy into the if in case I record for the on-premise servers, so is it possible to transfer or
no, you cannot upload the VHDX files to storage account, but you can upload VHD files to storage account, because here Azure storage account will support only VHD, not VHDX.
Okay. So I can't able to move the file from cloud to the on-premise. You mean to
From
say,
cloud
right?
to on-premises, you can move it.
Okay. So is there like by default option is there or any converter tool?
No, nothing is required. So by default, even you can upload your VHD, which is in your on-premises, that you can upload to Azure storage account, and that can be mounted to Azure virtual machines also. Similarly,
Okay.
you can download the Azure VHDs to your on-premises, and that can be used to your on-premises virtual machines also.
Okay, but the disk is encrypted or
That's up to your choice.
okay.
Because
So,
storage account, however you're configuring it based on that.
okay, fine. Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Any more questions? Okay, so if there is no more questions, so this is going to be the end of our session for today, and we'll discuss the remaining topics in the next session, that is by tomorrow. And thank you all for joining the session. Bye-bye. Good night.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.